Mike wasn't your typical entrepreneur. At 35, he owned a small food truck called Mike Street Eats, where he served up the city's best tacos, burgers, and sandwiches. But this wasn't just a business to Mike. It was a dream he'd built from scratch. Leaving behind a secure office job and risking every penny he had, Mike poured his heart into his food and his customers. What Mike didn't realize, though, was that his little blue food truck would soon become the epicenter of a story so powerful it would touch lives far beyond his regulars. It all started on a cold winter night when a single act of kindness toward a stranger in need set off a chain reaction that would change everything. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today, I'm excited to share a heartwarming story that will remind you how a simple act of kindness can change lives forever. Let's get started. Mike was a 35-year-old man who owned a small food truck called Mike Street Eats. Unlike other chefs who dreamed of owning fancy restaurants, Mike loved the freedom his food truck gave him. He could drive anywhere in the city and serve his delicious tacos, burgers, and sandwiches to different people every day. Life wasn't always easy for Mike. 3 years ago, he had invested all his savings into buying and fixing up an old food truck. His family thought he was crazy to leave his office job, but Mike followed his heart. He knew cooking was his true passion, even if it meant working twice as hard for less money. Mike's journey into the food business started when he was just a teenager, helping his grandmother in her small kitchen. She taught him all her secret recipes and always told him, "Food isn't just about filling stomachs, it's about filling hearts." Even though his grandmother was no longer with them, Mike carried her words and recipes with him every day. Every morning, Mike would wake up at 4 a.m. to prep his ingredients. He insisted on making everything fresh, from his special sauce to his hand-cut fries. By 6 a.m., he would drive his bright blue food truck to secure his favorite spot near the city park. He loved this location because it allowed him to serve both office workers during lunch hours and families enjoying the park in the evening. Even though his business was small, Mike made sure every customer left with a smile, not just because of his tasty food, but also because of his friendly personality. He remembered his regular customers' names and their favorite orders. Some days, he barely broke even, but seeing people enjoy his food made it all worthwhile. One particularly cold winter evening, just as Mike was about to close up for the day, he noticed an elderly man looking through the trash cans near his truck. The man wore a worn-out coat and seemed to be searching for food. Mike's heart sank at the sight. Without hesitation, he called out to the old man. "Sir, would you like something to eat?" Mike asked warmly. The elderly man, who will come to know as Mr. James, looked up with tired eyes. "Oh no, thank you. I don't have any money," he said softly, clearly embarrassed. "That's not what I asked," Mike smiled. "I have some fresh food left, and I'd hate to see it go to waste. Please, let me make you something." Reluctantly, Mr. James approached the food truck. Mike noticed how his hands trembled from the cold. "What would you like?" "I make a mean cheeseburger," Mike said cheerfully. "A cheeseburger would be wonderful," Mr. James replied with a grateful smile. As Mike prepared the burger, he added extra cheese and a generous portion of fries. He also poured a hot cup of coffee, knowing it would help warm up his unexpected customer. When he handed the food to Mr. James, the old man's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, young man. You don't know what this means to me," Mr. James said. That night marked the beginning of a daily routine. Every evening, Mr. James would stop by Mike's food truck, and Mike would always have a hot meal waiting for him. Sometimes they would chat about life, and Mike learned that Mr. James used to be a food critic before falling on hard times after his wife passed away. As weeks passed, Mike noticed subtle changes in Mr. James. His clothes were still worn, but they were cleaner. His posture became straighter, and his eyes regained some sparkle. He started sharing stories about his days as a food critic, reviewing restaurants all over the world. Mike loved hearing these tales and often asked for advice about his cooking. Some days, Mike barely made enough money to cover his costs, but he never turned Mr. James away. His mother had always taught him that kindness was more valuable than money, and he believed it with all his heart. Even on rainy days when business was slow, Mike would keep the truck open until Mr. James had his dinner. The other regular customers began to notice Mr. James too. Soon, they started buying extra food and telling Mike to pay it forward. This inspired Mike to create a small chalkboard where customers could prepay for meals for anyone who couldn't afford them. He called it the kindness menu. One day, about 3 months after their first meeting, Mr. James didn't show up at his usual time. Mike waited an extra hour, worried about the old man, but eventually had to close up for the night. The next day, Mr. James was still nowhere to be seen. Mike even drove around the neighborhood looking for him, but couldn't find him anywhere. A week passed and Mike started to fear the worst. The regular customers who had grown fond of Mr. James kept asking about him, and Mike didn't know what to tell them. But then something unexpected happened. A young woman in a business suit approached his food truck during the lunch rush. "Are you Mike?" she asked, holding up her phone. "The one who's been feeding my father?" Mike's heart skipped a beat. "Your father? Do you mean Mr. James?" "Yes," she smiled. "He's been in the hospital for the past week. He had a mild heart attack, but he's doing better now. He made me promise to come find you and tell you why he couldn't come for his daily meal." Mike felt relieved to hear Mr. James was okay, but the woman wasn't finished speaking. "What you don't know is that my father isn't just any food critic. He was one of the most respected restaurant critics in the country before he retired. After Mom died, he fell into depression and pushed everyone away. He's been living on his pension, refusing our help." She paused, wiping a tear from her eye. "But these past few months, he's been different. He kept talking about this kind food truck owner who not only fed him but treated him with dignity. He's been writing about you, you know." "Writing about me?" Mike asked, confused. "Yes," she smiled. "He may be retired, but he still has a food blog with thousands of followers. He's been sharing your story, your kindness, and of course, reviewing your food. Have you noticed more customers lately?" Mike had noticed his business picking up, but hadn't thought much about it. Now that she mentioned it, many new customers had said they heard about him online. They would often order exactly what Mr. James recommended in his blog posts. Just then, the woman handed Mike an envelope. Inside was an article from the city's largest food magazine. The headline read, "The Food Truck Hero, where excellent food meets extraordinary kindness." The article, written by Mr. James himself, told their story and praised Mike's food as the best street food in the city. It had been published online the previous day and had already gone viral. In the article, Mr. James revealed his identity as James Morrison, once the city's most influential food critic. Within weeks, Mike's food truck became the talk of the town. Lines formed every day, and food bloggers from all over came to try his famous cheeseburgers. Local news channels wanted to interview him, and a famous food show asked to feature his truck. The attention brought unexpected opportunities. A local business owner offered Mike a chance to park his truck in prime locations throughout the city. A food supplier, touched by his story, offered him better rates on ingredients. Even Mike's parents, who had doubted his career choice, called to say how proud they were. 3 months later, Mike opened his second food truck. By the end of the year, he had 5 trucks operating across the city. But success didn't change Mike's heart. Each of his trucks had a special policy. At the end of each day, they would serve free meals to anyone who couldn't afford to pay. The kindness menu became a permanent feature at all locations. As for Mr. James, he recovered fully and became a regular fixture at Mike's original truck location. But now, instead of coming as someone in need, he came as family. Mike had given him a purpose again, and Mr. James helped Mike manage his growing business using his years of experience in the food industry. Together, they started a program called Feed the Soul, which partnered with local shelters to provide meals to people in need. Mr. James's daughter, Sarah, joined the team as their marketing director, helping spread their message of kindness across social media. Every Thursday evening, Mike and Mr. James would sit in the park near where they first met, enjoying cheeseburgers and sharing stories. They often talked about how a simple act of kindness had changed both their lives forever. Sometimes they would spot someone in need and quietly buy them a meal, remembering how their own story began. Today, Mike Street Eats is known not just for its delicious food, but for its commitment to feeding those in need. Mike always tells people, success tastes sweetest when shared with others. His grandmother's saying about filling hearts, not just stomachs, had become the motto of his business. The true wealth in life isn't measured by how much money we make, but by how many lives we touch with kindness. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion can lead to the biggest changes in our lives. As Mike and Mr. James proved, when you feed someone's dignity along with their hunger, you create a recipe for hope that can transform an entire community. Loved this story? Tap that like button and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming tales. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments. While you're at it, check out the video currently on your screen. See you next time.